Yeah.
Seriously, I should have brought mine.
Right.
I should have brought mine.
Okay, so I'm going to make some tea, and we're going to talk about something very cool today. Let's just welcome everybody joining us. This is going to be special, especially for you, struggling with what's happening today. I know everybody is struggling. Everybody is working a lot of hours to try to cope with this whole situation of teaching from your home, right?
Yeah.
How are you coping with that, Rudy?
Well, actually, for me, it's all right. I mean, I have an English school that's 100% online, so
bilingue, right?
For me, bilingue. So
exactly.
So for me, it's
it wasn't a big change, right? It wasn't a big change.
Yeah. Hopefully, people are going to see that. Having English classes online is not so hard. It's not so bad. So they're going to shift their mindsets. And then hopefully when everything is back to normal or back to whatever normal it was, right? Have, and hopefully everything is going to be just fine. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, for me, as a teacher, I still have some private students. It didn't really change much. So I kind of, migrated, transitioned to online teaching for, the last couple of years, I think. So I also have a bunch of online courses. We have an online course together. So it hasn't really changed much. But for a lot of teachers, everything has changed overnight, right? So just before we start, I just wanted to kind of describe the situation that a lot of teachers that I oversee are going through right now. Yeah. So some teachers who work at regular schools, who were always teaching face-to-face lessons, they were in class with the students, especially kids from educação infantil, like the little ones, the very young learners, they've had to learn how to, provide materials and content and interaction and everything using online platforms, like overnight, like next week, couple of days from now, do it. I don't care how you do it. Some teachers are desperate. They're crying. I can totally understand why. It's not an easy thing to do. And we also have to mention that there are millions of people who don't even have access to the internet, right? So it's a disaster.
Not only teachers, we also have students who don't have access to internet. So
Exactly. So, we have a bunch of people who don't even own a cell phone or a computer, but we do have some people who can somehow benefit from this whole thing. I'm not saying the pandemic is a good thing. Please don't get that from me, It's a horrible thing. A lot of people are dying. But if we can look on the bright side of one aspect, which is we're going to have to reinvent ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think Raisa said poor connection.
Yeah, we're having poor. Well,
is it ours or the teachers?
No, I think she's talking about our connection here. So if the connection on Instagram is really hard, today we have a special surprise, as we mentioned yesterday. So this episode of Shop Pedagógico is being streamed live on YouTube as well.
Yes.
So if you're having Instagram problems, because nowadays everybody's having this is streaming live, so we're going to have a lot of people streaming live on Instagram. Yeah. So go to YouTube, search for Marcelo Consultoria, because this Shop Pedagógico is being streamed live there. So you can communicate with us on YouTube as well. So
exactly. Awesome.
Aline is saying that
I think they said that it's okay.
Yeah. Well, that's another option. Okay. So go ahead, Andre. You were saying.
Yeah, just to wrap up this first part, I think that the idea here is for us to offer those teachers who can actually do something about the whole crisis, to learn something useful and think about their practices and how you can transition whatever you are doing face-to-face to this online platform, whatever platform you choose to use, right? Yeah. Again, it's not going to solve all your problems. There are some things that we cannot deal with now because we don't have the structure, we don't have the time. And I think that brings us to the first part of this conversation. what are we doing exactly right now? Are we doing online teaching? Are we teaching online? Because, you know, there's a lot of theory behind that, right?
Yeah.
Or are we doing something that we read in the paper that some experts are calling emergency remote teaching, right?
ERT.
So exactly. So emergency remote teaching is basically what we're doing now, and which means that we were not prepared for it. We were caught by surprise, but you know, we had no idea we had to do that. And suddenly a lot of people with no expertise in how to do that started learning how to use some platforms, some basic principles, and then started applying. But what most people are doing, they're just transferring what they would normally do in the classroom and adapting for online platforms in a very temporary kind of way. You know, we don't know how long this is going to last. We haven't really planned for it. So it's not really online teaching, because there are a lot of things behind online teaching for those who have online courses that we know that we have to plan. We have a certain format of the classes, how we're going to provide content, how we're going to make videos available and everything, right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think many of us have never questioned the difference between online teaching and remote teaching. We assume that these two types of teaching are all the same thing. When
exactly.
It's not. When it's not.
Yeah.
All right. I think what's happening now is what happened some years ago when when we started using virtual, not virtual, but well, I can say that virtual materials or textbooks, etc., PDF files, etc., or even iPad, tablets in general. Some years ago, especially tablets, and I remember specifically a school here in Campinas, and they said not the slogan, but the advertisement read something like, I'm not going to say the name of the school, of course. But, yes, of course, I'm not going to do that. But we are the school of the future, because all of our students have been working with tablets, iPads. They specifically said iPads. And there was a picture of a classroom. The layout of the classroom was exactly the same as 500 years ago. So one student sitting behind the other, and they had an iPad on the desk and a sheet of paper right beside of it. And then I saved the photo and I zoomed in the photo because I really wanted to see what was happening. And because the picture was in high resolution, I could see one of the students, they were taking a test. So basically, the questions of the exam was on the iPad, and they had to answer on a piece of paper. And I was like, wait a minute. So that's not how that's not how technology works. So I think it's going to be the same with this online and remote teaching stuff.
Most definitely. Like you said, they're using some technologies in the old way. So they're basically just shifting from something a little more, less technological to something more technological, but they still have the same mindset. They're still doing the same things, right? Yeah.
So the very first thing we have to remember is there are two different things. One is emergential. This is something that's happening. It happened out of the blue. Nobody was expecting that. So basically what we've been seeing lately in many cases, in many schools, and again, I'm not saying that everybody that's watching us is part of this group that's being remotely teaching and saying and thinking that it's online, okay? But the big part, the main part of teachers in schools, they've been remotely teaching. And the whole thing is they are transferring the interactions, the exercises, the tasks, everything that happened in the classroom, they've been transferring that to the webcam.
Exactly.
Okay? Zoom, Hangouts, Skype, I don't know, whatever platform it's being used, they've been transferring. So it's like they've been transferring iPad to notebook. So it's not how it works. Online teaching is deeper than this. So it goes, the planning is different.
Yeah.
There are many theories. The planning is completely different.
Exactly. So, the whole structure is different.
The whole structure is different. So the same way that when we're planning a lesson, we have to plan the goals. And then based on the goals, we go backwards, and then we start thinking about the activities that we're going to select, the materials we're going to select, etc., the age of our students, how many students we have in the classroom, the whole settings of the rest of the group. It's the same with online teaching, but then we're going to think about all these aspects with the online environment in mind. So it's completely different. So, for example, the whole interaction, we're going to talk about the interaction in a while. Okay, I don't want to spoil now. But
don't spoil it, man.
No, it's my turn today. Jeez.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to spoil it. But the thing is, what about the interactional pattern that we're going to use for online teaching?
Yeah,
is it going to be
completely
the same?
Different? Yeah.
So because depending on the activity that you transfer to the webcam that you're using or the platform that you're using, maybe that activity was designed for classroom instruction.
Exactly, face-to-face instruction, right?
And when I say face-to-face, I mean live. I mean two people in the same place. Because we're having face-to-face situation here. But anyway,
exactly.
But anyway, so these are the whole things that we have to think when we're preparing or when we're actually thinking about online teaching. The whole settings and interactional patterns.
And online teaching assumes a lot of things. You know, there are a couple of demands that need to be met if we want it to work. For example, what kind of access do our students have to the internet? So nowadays, if you're teaching at, I don't know, elementary school here in Brazil or whatever, you are just using whatever you have to reach the students. Online teaching assumes that all the students will have access to the internet, that they have maybe a Gmail account so that they can, use Google Drive links and Google Classroom or whatever. There are a lot of demands that need to be met before, and that's one thing. The other thing that online teaching assumes is that you're not going to have synchronous classes only. And when I say synchronous, I'm saying live, just like we're doing now. We're actually here right now together, and we're talking to each other. But we could, but if you didn't catch us today, you're going to watch this later. So it was recorded, right? Yeah. So whenever we students, especially for higher education, when we want to have an online class, we are normally going to like it or want it to be more flexible. That's one of the whole points of doing online classes, that you can actually work your schedule. I don't need to watch it now because I don't have time now, but I can watch it later. And for that to work, we're going to have to make shorter videos. And those videos, they're going to have a goal. They're going to have a task. So we can work with maybe 5-minute videos or even 10-minute videos. That could work depending on how you make them. But there is a task. You have to watch the video and you have to do something right after. You have to answer like a multiple choice activity, or you have to do a project. And you even have some pre-materials. So you have to do something before you engage with the video, right? So what we are doing now is not really taking that into consideration. Of course, a lot of teachers are struggling a lot to try to make that happen, but they don't have the theory. They haven't had online courses. They have never created online courses. And to wrap up this, I think I can mention Mirella's analogy. So our mentor, our MBE SIG leader, Mirella Hamasiotti, MBE, by the way, Mind Brain Education. Yeah. She wrote a wonderful text about how this is more like an emergency situation. Like you need to operate, you need to have surgery because you had some problem with your eye. Somebody stabbed you or somebody did something, and then you go, you get rushed into the emergency room, right? And then you have a bunch of doctors trying to help the people who have coronavirus, and then you have something in your eye and it's an emergency. And then they use whatever they have to try to save your eye, right? But online teaching, so that's remote teaching, right? It's an emergency. We're going to use whatever we have. We were not expecting. We might not even be prepared. But online teaching, there's a whole planning behind it. And it's more like having cataract surgery, you know? So you have something in your eye or glaucoma or whatever, and you go to the doctor and you get, you know, a checkup, and then you plan when to have the surgery, and you do whatever the doctor tells you to do. So there's a structure behind that, and it's an easy surgery then, right? I mean, you're not, you're probably not going to lose your eye, right?
Yeah, it's not one of, nowadays it's not one of the most complex surgeries that we have. I mean, it's still very subtle and delicate and stuff. We have the doctors have to be extremely prepared for that. But I remember some decades ago, when people said, "Oh, I'm going to have a cataract surgery," people were scared because the whole technology, well, the whole world was different decades ago.
Most definitely,
yes, this text that Mirella published this week. Yep. And by the way, now that we're streaming this episode on YouTube, it's going to be possible to also share some of the links, some of the articles that we're going to mention here. So
perfect.
It's not just for connection issues. We are also trying to give you more access to a lot of information, et cetera, et cetera. So this text, this article that you wrote is really, really cool. And this analogy is perfect. It's amazing. She hit the bullseye with this article. But the whole, and of course we have to plan everything ahead with the digital environment in mind, because as I mentioned some minutes ago, we have to think about the interaction. And then I have to cite the study that Bernard and a bunch of other people involved.
We never remember their names.
No, it's not. It's because there are so many people. Seriously, that's why it's Bernard at all, you know. But there, if I'm not wrong, there are 6 or 7 people involved with this study. But Bernard was probably the head of the whole thing. But his study says that nowadays we have but when we think about online teaching, we have to think about three types of interactions: student-student interaction, student-teacher interaction, and student content interaction. And then you might say, but Rudy, we've instruction. Yeah, but if you're actually thinking about online teaching, you have to think about now, not the classroom environment, but the digital space, because it's completely different. So student-student interaction, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same at all, because in the classroom, all they got to do is look and talk to their classmate. Okay? Online, not necessarily, because depending on the age or depending on the students, they're going to be idle a little bit. So it's not like you can poke the student like, hey, talk to me, I'm talking to you.
Remember the MSN feature that you could shake the
you
remember that?
And
the screen, and that would be useful for now, right?
Yes. So the whole student-student interaction has to be carefully thought. You have to think about this very carefully. Student-teacher interaction, totally different. So
huge challenge, like Haiza said.
Yes, of course, it is a huge challenge when we consider, depending on the age, even adults. Okay, because we tend to think that student-student interaction is very challenging when they're very young.
Most definitely,
of course, it is extremely challenging. Okay, but for adults, it's also challenging, because some of them are so tired of having now, especially now, meetings, online calls, etc., that they also become idle. They just and how do you keep track of that, right? It's me. So they're going to have, it's going to be hard. So you have to think about this. Student-teacher interaction is completely different. Okay, so we're all language teachers here. We all know that. Depending on the group, I'm not talking about individual classes, but when we have pairs, trios, groups in general, we tend to minimize our talking time, so we tend to provide more accurate input, so our students have more chances for output, for production, et cetera, et cetera.
That's perfect.
Online, this has to be even sharper. Even sharper.
Yeah. Much more carefully planned, right?
Much more carefully planned, you know?
Yeah.
So, and there's one more thing. Depending on the platform that our teachers are going to use, that we are going to use, some of our students have access to their controls, which means they can toggle on and off their microphones.
Raisa just mentioned that. They hate it when she opened her mics, right? Yeah.
So, yeah.
When they have to open it, or when you open it, Raisa, because But so, I just wanted to mention something that Rudy was saying. We have to be very careful when we plan the types of interaction we're going to have. So I know a lot of schools that are actually, because they're desperate, they really don't know what to do. I can understand that there's a lot of pressure coming from the parents, right? Because parents are also desperate. They have too many kids around in the house, screaming, jumping around, So we can understand that. But that can lead you to a terrible situation, a mistake, actually. So you cannot demand from your teachers to put together all the groups, everyone. Imagine you have like terceiro ano, right? So we're talking about educação infantil, fundamental 1 and 2,
no, it's
right?
Fundamental
like,
1.
Exactly. But let's imagine the whole thing, right? So basic education here in Brazil, from very young learners and teens. So we're gonna have imagine you have 3 groups from terceiro ano, so 3rd graders, and you have to put them all together because you want one teacher to cover the whole thing for every student, and then you end up having 94 students connected at the same time for you to deliver an online lesson. That doesn't work, guys. That doesn't work. I mean, especially if they're 3rd graders, because they're too young. It's very likely that their parents are going to have to help them a little bit, at least connect using their whatever device they're using. And then how the heck is the teacher going to work with interaction? I mean, first of all, because, if I open your mic and I don't open your mic, your parent is going to be super angry at me. Like, why didn't you give my son the chance to interact, right? Yeah. If I split you guys into breakout rooms using Zoom, it's going to take forever. How many breakout rooms are you going to use? So it doesn't work. And then if you are going to be online with those students for the same amount of time you were in the face-to-face classes, like 45 minutes or 50 minutes, that doesn't work, because that's not how online teaching works. I mean, we're doing remote teaching, but we have to look at online teaching and the theory and how it works best, so we can transfer that to whatever we're doing now. And and then again, so there are many ways you can interact with students, even with pre-recorded video classes. Yes. You can record a very short video, pause, and then you can ask them to pause to do something and then get back after they're done. You can give them some time, like, okay, so do this now. And you wait 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Or you can give them instructions to do something at the end of the video, and then you record another video. And then for them to be able to watch and follow the other video, they have to have done whatever you asked them to do, right? So there are ways you can provide interaction with student-teacher interaction, right?
Yes, and still mentioning Bernard's study, he also said online teaching, we have 3 subcategories related to online teaching. We have the synchronous type, we have the asynchronous type, and we have the blended type. All right.
Exactly.
So it's not just think, okay, so it's a digital space, so I'm going to do this. No, it's not just this. You have to think based on the goal, based on your learner needs, based on a lot of stuff that you predefine, then you go backwards, and then you start thinking about these things. Okay, so what are my learners' needs? Oh, so my learners' needs is blah, blah, blah. Great. So let's suppose you're going to work out some verb tenses. Okay. Do I have to be live with my students? What if I just record a video and assign a task? Can I do that?
Exactly.
What if I do that and also put a message right underneath the video, depending on how you're going to upload the video? What if I post a message saying that we're going to be live on the day after, in case some students still have some questions? So then it's not going to be neither asynchronous nor synchronous. It's going to be blended, because you are going to have some sort of interaction with your students. So you see how many things we have to think about when we're going. Definitely, we have to think about the interaction that our students are going to have with the content, with the materials that you're going to select. Because one thing is, get them the textbook that you got. So let's suppose you're going to receive a PDF file, and then what you're going to do, you're going to email your students a PDF file. So that's not online. So when we talk about online,
your students might not even have an email account, right?
Yes, and even if they do, how can it be so sure that they are actually going to do that? And then look at all the hassle that they'll have to go through. They'll have to get the email, download the PDF, do the activity, and then email you back. No. So because that's why when you think about the digital space, you can anticipate these things. You can anticipate these obstacles. And then you think, okay, so I don't want my students to go through the hassle of downloading files, emailing things. No, things have to be very dynamic, especially
otherwise they won't do it.
Yes, especially if these activities are meant to be done during the class. Okay, so all right, so nowadays we have sharing tools. So this is one of the things that also motivates our students, when they can actually do something and share it with the world. This is amazing, because they're going to feel like, oh my God, I did this, and now the whole world can see whatever I did. So this is very motivating. So you have to think about this kind of interaction that our students are going to have with the content. What kind of, okay, so I saw one of my friends, she's dealing with, I think
K-12?
I think it's K-12. I'm not so sure, but she deals with very young learners, okay? I'm not sure the group that she has now, but she teaches very young learners. And she posted something here on Instagram a couple of days ago. It was a coloring activity. But the coloring activity was being done, I think, on a PowerPoint or something like that. And then I was thinking, but how the hell? I'm sorry.
It's okay, man. How the hell are students going to... Pardon my French, right?
Scusami italiano.
Andiamo a parlare, ragazzo.
So, how the heck? Okay, so how the heck are they going to color that? So so they have to think about this. What about online resources? We have a bunch of resources nowadays. Okay?
We do.
I actually selected some of the resources. I only need to get.
Please share. Why will you share?
If you want to create a timeline, I normally everybody uses timeline, for instance, for the perfect tenses. Everybody uses that. But when we design a timeline, we teachers design a timeline, it's okay, it's nice, but this resource, an hour later, we can do that, but it's completely interactive, and the students can also create their own timeline. So one of the things that I do at Bilingue, at my language school, when I'm teaching this, one of the activities is, okay, guys, so now you're going to create your own timeline, because this timeline
that's cool.
Is there's no time limit, so you can go backwards, you can go forward in time.
That's perfect.
You can insert photos, you can insert URL links, YouTube videos, etc., etc. So the name of the link is Time Graphics, time.graphics. So this is one thing.
Okay, cool.
And for instance, the other thing, everybody loves matching activities.
Definitely.
Play. Educa Play is another website.
Educa Play is awesome. I love it.
Educa Play is amazing.
That's a great tool. Yeah.
Why is that? Because it's not going to be us having contact with the matching activity. It's not going to be pencil and paper. The students are going to be doing that online, and then the whole software is going to give them some feedback. It's really cool.
Definitely.
There are also other types of games that you can do on Educa Play. I'm just using matching activities. If you want to create mind maps, you also have flowcharts. Okay.
Flowchart. MindMeister is pretty cool too.
There's MindMaster. The one I use is lucidchart.com. It's really cool. All you got to do is click on the arrow and drag it, and the arrow's done. It's really cool. It's free. These are all free resources. So these are some of the content that our students are going to have access with. And
definitely,
they're going to feel okay because it's not going to be pencil and paper. That's the whole point of online.
It's going to speak their language, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is something that I've been talking about. It speaks their technological language. They were born into this world of technology, and we're not actually offering them technological solutions in the classroom. And I mean, I know that we don't know everything. We can't do it because sometimes we don't have the time, or because of the top-down policy that we have to follow. You have to teach this and you have to cover the content. But I think that if we start learning a little bit more about the technology that they like to use, that's very important. And Rafa mentioned something very important here. He says, I agree, and I think it's important for teachers to reveal to parents what will happen during the classes, the differences comparing to regular classes, and what to expect in terms of students' production. So you know what I'm getting, man? There are a lot of parents, especially with very young learners, who just, they have to be there with their kids because their kids are not independent learners, right? So they have to be there to set up everything, turn on the camera, whatever. And the parents, they actually answer the teacher's questions instead of allowing their kids because they get impatient, or they just want teachers to send more and more written activities when many of those students don't even know how to write yet. So it doesn't make sense,
Yes.
And to give...
And they're going to feel bad because imagine, I don't have kids yet, but I can imagine if I were like a 9-year-old kid nowadays, and someone gave me the message, okay, Rudy, so now you're going to have classes online. I would be super excited because I know.
Me too.
The tools and the resources and the opportunities that the internet gives us. So I would be super excited. Now imagine how frustrating our students would be if you come up with an activity, with a PDF file that has some limitations. They can normally, in a normal situation, in a normal condition, a PDF file cannot be edited. Of course, nowadays we have a lot of tools, but the core of PDF is you cannot change it. That's why you use it for documents. So can you imagine your students are going to receive the PDF file and they're going to be like, okay, so I cannot edit. I'll have to read it on the screen on a monitor, and then I'll have to grab a piece of paper. So no, that's not cool. So the whole, and again, this interaction, all kinds of interaction are very important. Student, teacher, student content. The study that I mentioned here by Bernard et al., they say that the more interaction we have, it doesn't matter the kind of interaction, but the more we have, the higher the achievement of our students are going to be. So we have to encourage them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that brings us to assessment, because you mentioned something very important, that we have to take blended learning into consideration. And I think that this is something to keep in mind, because the human element, being there with your student, even if you're doing it through an online platform, is very important to build rapport with your students. And we know that for very, very young learners, that's even more essential. And we know from a bunch of studies, there was an MIT report that looked at all the literature available. Okay, he's going to come back. I'm going to wait for him. So anyway, I was talking about blended learning and how the human element, the human factor, there he is. I think something happened to the connection, but I'm going to add him. Hey, what happened to you, Rudy?
Am I back? Am I back?
Okay, we're back. We froze, but we're back. We're okay. We survived.
Whoa!
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Hi, guys, I'm back.
So, we're back. So we were talking about assessment, something with the connection. I think there are too many people connecting nowadays, right? Because of the whole
hopefully
lockdown.
Hopefully they're connecting to us. They're watching us, right?
I hope so. I hope so.
So go ahead, continue.
Yeah. I was talking about blended learning and rapport and everything. And so there was an MIT report that looked at a meta-analysis. They actually conducted a meta-analysis, which basically is looking at all the literature available, crossing everything, all the data, and increasing the power of your conclusions, right? Of your they would just suggest things. Right? So they suggested that, right? So they suggested that online teaching actually works, but if you have an online only component, which means that students are only online, so there's no physical connection, it doesn't work as well as, especially for kids. And again, neuroscience and psychology can explain that kids, they need to have someone in front of them, an adult, to co-regulate their behavior, to help them with self-regulation in the future, to motivate them, to tell them what to do, to guide them, to help them develop their executive functions, inhibitory control. We know that. And that doesn't work very well through a screen. We know that, right? On the other hand, you have some gains for assessment, right? And then we're going to talk very quickly about that. Because if you're using online platforms, you can better track your students' learning outcomes and performance. Because if you're using, I don't know, let's say you're using Google Classroom and you assign a bunch of things, you can check how many of your students actually engaged with the assignment. You can check if they did it. You can check their scores. You can give them instant feedback. They can get a score, like if they do like a multiple choice activity. You can even use Google Forms. You can make Google Forms. You can make tests like quizzes, and you are working with formative assessment much more than summative assessment. And we know that formative assessment is essential in every lesson, in every course. It doesn't have to be in every lesson, but in every course.
Especially in languages, because things don't happen overnight. So
exactly. It's a process, right? So summative assessment is much more about the product, and formative assessment is much more about the process. And I think that there are many ways that we can work with assessment. We can ask our students to engage with the content, so student-content interaction. We can give them instructions to produce something at home using whatever materials they have. And we can actually ask them to interact with their peers, so student-student interaction, using the platforms that we created. So we can tell them, for example, why don't you guys set up a forum on Google Classroom and you talk about whatever, and I'm just going to be there monitoring. I'm just going to look at what you're producing, right? If they don't know how to write yet, if they cannot produce anything in writing, we have a bunch of tools for them to record videos or audio messages. Of course, they're going to need their parents' help to do that. But still, that's a way for us to keep track of their learning, right?
And one of the best things about formative assessment is when you create a portfolio of your students' activities. I really like this.
Yes.
And since we're talking about online teaching, again, let's go back to the beginning of this episode when we were talking about the whole planning of our lessons, the whole planning of our classes. So when you have this in mind, when you have in mind that you are going to use a digital space, you're also going to think about the assessment. And then Of course, you're going to think about design or creating a portfolio of your students' activities. And
Exactly.
one of the resources that we have nowadays, I'm not sure if you have to pay to use it. I think they have a free version of it. It's Bulb.
Yeah.
Bulb is a website. You create digital portfolios. Students can interact with this portfolio. It's amazing. It's really good, and it's really cool, and it's really simple. I've already worked with Bulb. It's really cool. It's simple.
Nice.
It's really simple. You can add photos. You can type things. You can add videos. You can add URLs. So you can do all these things. Students can also edit. All you got to do is change the toggle to students can edit it. So it's a very super simple Google Classroom. Very simple, because Google Classroom has more tools. Bulb doesn't have that many tools, but because that's the point. They don't need to have many tools because they are a portfolio. The idea is to create a portfolio. So you can insert photos, you can add videos, you can edit things. Great. You don't need anything else.
You can also use Padlet, right? Padlet is great for that.
Yes, you can create Padlet. So that's the point. So when you're going to assess your students, you also have to think about the environment that you're going to be in, that they're going to be in. And of course, again, how they are going to interact with that. And once again, how they are going to behave. Because remember, student-student interaction also changes in the virtual space. So they are going to have a different kind of behavior, and you have to anticipate that.
Definitely.
What we're doing now, of course, it's just the beginning of this pandemic. There's a chance that we're going to have this social distancing for quite a while. So hopefully we're going to have time to shape things up, and hopefully we're going to learn a lot from this whole situation. But
definitely,
we're going to share some. We're going to give you guys or 5 cents here, and our 5 cents is that start thinking about this difference, because remote teaching, which is what's happening now, we're not thinking about it. We're not thinking about the assessment. What are you going to do? How are you going to assess our students? How are you going? Because we know that many schools still like this final exam thing, which is the most common summative assessment that we have in Brazil, and the most traditional too. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to how are you going to convince principals and coordinators that this is not going to have, this is not very effective in the classroom instruction. So now in the online teaching, if you're actually going to have an online teaching, this is going to be even less effective.
And you know what, man? I think we forgot to talk about, actually to give some practical tips on how to interact, or how to help your students interact, and how to assess them. And I'd like to say to all the teachers listening to us who are struggling, because we know you are, we know you're working 12, 16 hours a day, trying to edit videos and, being online with your students. I know it's terrible, but I think the best format, something that actually works well, is make a lot of pre-recorded videos. So actually make video classes, very short video classes, a bunch of them, and then set up one day of the week or maybe 2 days of the week to be online with your students. If you have too many students, then you work out your schedule. But if you're going to be live with your students for 1 hour or 50 minutes or 45 minutes, just for the sake of, do something with them, because, that's what your coordination, your direction has asked you to do or whatever, that's not going to be the most effective thing. We know that sometimes you have no say. You just have to, obey top-down orders. We know that. But I think there is a pedagogical principle here that needs to be respected. I think that, first of all, a lot of parents are doing their work from home as well. And then demanding them to be live online with their students at the same time you were teaching might not be very realistic. So you need to offer them an alternative. You have to make sure that, today we're not going to be live together online. We're going to send them a video so they can watch anytime they want. And this video doesn't have to be 45 minutes long. No, you can send 4 videos, 4 5-minute videos, because those 5-minute videos are going to demand something.
Yes, because it's mathematics, right? If you have 4 videos,
exactly,
4 5-minute videos, you're going to have 20 minutes. And then these videos are going to demand their students to spend some time
to
doing
do something.
the activity.
Yeah.
And you have more minutes.
It's going to take them 1 hour, because that's what we do in the classroom. And then parents don't see that. We have to tell them that. We show our students something. We present language, vocabulary, grammar, or we work with skills or whatever. And then we ask our students to do something. And then they work in pairs, they work in trios, they work in groups, they work individually. But then we monitor, we walk around and we listen to them, we correct their mistakes. So we have to make sure that we do something similar in a way by providing our students with videos. And how do you interact with your students? You have to tell parents that not everyone...
Are we back? I think we're back. I think, yeah, I can hear you.
What the heck is going on? Okay, we still have a couple of minutes. So to wrap up what I was saying, come on. It's probably because we're testing something new, guys. So, bear with us, okay? So tell the parents and be very, very open about it. Not every son, every daughter will have the opportunity to say something during the lesson. You're going to help them open their mics and say something, but you have to prioritize. So if you're going to use breakout rooms, it's going to be chaos if parents don't know how to do that. So maybe you should avoid that. If you're doing that with older students, they're going to mess around. They're going to break into different rooms. They're going to talk about other things because you cannot monitor everyone, but you can try. So you got to be aware of those things, right?
I think, as a matter of fact, this is really important, but I actually think this is like point number 2. This is the second step.
Yeah.
I think we have a previous step before we get into that. I think the whole school, I think the school is responsible for that. You have to engage parents first. The school has the responsibility to talk to the parents first and tell them, parents, this is how this is going to work. But the problem is, not even schools know the difference between online and remote teaching. They have no idea of this difference. They don't know that. So hopefully, if you guys are watching us, if you're watching us directly on Instagram, if you're watching us on YouTube, if you're going to listen to us on Spotify later on, and also on YouTube, because this video is going to be on YouTube for the rest of the days, for the rest of our lives.
For the rest of YouTube, right?
So show this to your principals, to your coordinators, because it's important that the school engages the parents. So the school has to engage parents, so parents understand what's going to happen, how things are going to happen, and then of course our job is going to be a little bit facilitated by that, not completely, because it's a job. If it was too easy, it wouldn't be called a job. It would be called vacations. But it's not vacations, right?
Especially our job, right?
Especially our job. So engage parents first. Show this episode to your principals and peers at your school that are not watching or cannot or are not watching us right now. Tell them to go to Spotify. Tell them to watch us later on the recording of this episode. Because the more teachers are aware of this difference, are aware of how to plan, are aware of this whole dichotomy that we have between online and remote teaching, the more power you're going to have to talk to your principals and coordinators,
Yeah, and just to let's try to answer Gabriel's question, which is a very hard question, by the way. But he says, how about parents who can't help their children? Not because they don't want to, but because they just can't. So like I was saying, Gabriel, I think we have to offer them alternatives. And I think that being online at a specific time, specific day, to talk to their students, to the kids, might not be the best option. Okay, I think Rudy froze again. I hope you can hear me. So anyway, I think offering video classes might be a better alternative. And then, can you hear me? Anyone? Because I think Rudy left, but I'm here, but he'll be back. Sorry again, folks. For some reason, our connection sucks today, but he'll be back. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Just say something so I can go on. Anybody? Come on, come on. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Okay, let's invite Rodolfo again. Yes, Samuka, thank you. Samuka can hear me.
What?
Oh,
WTF?
man.
Seriously, WTF?
Yes, dude. Yeah, but I apologize. We're back. We survived the fall. We're here. But anyway, Gabriel, just try to offer alternatives, okay? Video classes might be the best option. Students, actually teachers can help set up instructions in Portuguese, for example, if especially if you're working with very young learners, because we know that most of the Brazilian population cannot speak English. So if you want parents to help their kids with instructions, you have to translate it. But don't let parents interfere or intervene too much.
At all.
Because you know what? They're going to want to help their kids too much and even tell them the answer. That's bad. Yes. Tell them your main function is to turn on the tablet and turn it off and open the mics if they have if you have to. That's it. That's
what I was going to tell you. The whole thing about engaging parents is so that parents understand and can work as a supervisor. The parents are not necessarily going to help students directly with their activities or in the learning process. It's just as you said, Andre. They're going to turn on the computer or the laptop and turn it off, and they're going to be and of course they're going to be there supervising the kids so that they don't do anything stupid on the web, because but basically it's not a matter, but I think most parents are not going to be able to help students technically speaking in the activity, etc., but they'll be able, if the school engages the parents, I think they're going to be able to actually be there to work as a supervisor. I think we can wrap it up, can't we? Because
so I just wanted to before we freeze again, I just wanted to mention a wonderful initiative by this guy. He's a professor at the University of Newcastle in the UK. Beautiful place, by the way. I've been there. Maybe you've been there too, Rudy. When you were going to Scotland.
It's really close. It's really close to Edinburgh. Yeah.
Exactly. So this guy, he's Indian from Bengali, and his name is Sugata Mitra. He's a very famous guy. He has a bunch of TED Talks, and he says, actually, he conducted a very cool experiment in the late 90s, in 1999, I think, in India, rural India, where people have no access to the internet, especially in the 90s, right? So he called this self-organized learning environments. So basically, he got some PCs connected to the internet, and he placed them in a hole. So he made holes in the wall everywhere on the streets of rural India, and he put the computers there. And then kids would come and start interacting with the computer, learning how to use the computer, and suddenly they were making things that, they were actually pros. They learned how to use the computer. They learned how to record their own songs. They learned how to download stuff from Disneyland, and, they learned on their own. Of course, they were older kids. They were like maybe 12, 13 or whatever. But that shows us something. It shows us that if we provide kids with the opportunity and the technology, they can do wonderful things. Yeah. And we need to show parents that is possible without their interference, or, they just need to help kids get there to the opportunity. And then as teachers, we have to work with this more autonomous sort of learning, because this is the opportunity for us to do that now. So instead of being very content-based, we're going to make content much more, let's say, in a way that kids can interact more with content in different ways, not just, absorb everything and then kind of, spill everything out when they're doing a test. That's not the point here. Let's give them some autonomy, right?
Yes, that's the whole point, and that's why we have internet. That's why we have everything. So guys, remember, there's a difference. When you're preparing your lessons now, remember that we have a digital space, and it's completely different from classroom instruction. The digital environment, the internet environment is completely different. We have different resources. We have different types of interaction.
Definitely.
I have to thank before we wrap up. So guys, thank you so much. If you're watching us on Instagram, if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much. I hope you had a great time with us on YouTube. I think if you had a great time, tell us that you had a great time.
Tell us, please. Yeah.
So we can share that, so we can continue streaming directly on Instagram and on YouTube. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Andre, thank you again, brother.
Thank you. And hopefully the next time we do it, our